Hi, Colleen. Thank you so much for joining us. To give a bit of context, we met last year when we rebranded and redesigned your website. We've worked together for a few months, and I really loved your approach. So I wanted to hear more about you, what you learned from 2020, how you grew. So yeah, why don't you start with introducing yourself and your business for us?
Well, thank you for having me. It's nice to have this conversation. Um, my name is Colleen Siddig, and I am an interior designer, and I'm based out of Rowayton, Connecticut, which is about an hour out of New York City. And I used to live in Brooklyn, but we moved out here around 2016. And I started my business in Brooklyn in 2013, and I've since kind of relocated and made the shift to Connecticut.
Did you love working in Brooklyn? Was it very different from what you do now, like clients and everything?
Yeah, I mean, inherently different because, you're dealing with city apartments and very different spaces from what you have out here in the suburbs, more space, bigger houses, different layouts.
Mm.
A 1 or 2 bedroom apartment is pretty different from a 4 or 5 bedroom house.
Yeah.
So there's definitely an adjustment, and there was definitely a period of adjustment when I first moved out here and started to do work again. But the two, I mean, doing projects in the city versus out here, they are different. What people want is different aesthetics sometimes. So it's taken a few years to kind of realign and, better assess what it is that people are looking for, but also what works with my own aesthetic and sort of, find that middle ground. But it's a work in progress, and, I've made the transition. I did enjoy working on projects in the city, but there's a lot, that I enjoy about working on houses out here too.
I'm sure. Yeah, and I hope we can get more into that and everything. But first, I really wanted to walk us through your path that led you here, because I know you have a really interesting background. You didn't grow up in Connecticut. Yeah, tell us about how you got here.
Sure. Well, I grew up on Cape Cod. So when I came to Rowayton, it was really the best of both worlds because it was still close to the city, but it's also a coastal town. So that was familiar to home and relatable. And, we made the move just because we kind of outgrew our space in the city, and we felt that it was time to make a switch because we had young children. But it was hard to give up a lot of the city benefits as well. Like anyone who moves here from the city, there's definitely, an adjustment period, but there's so much to gain with the space, and, there's a little bit of ease that comes with life out here, being able to get around more easily. But anyway, I guess in terms of design and how I got into this profession and where it all began, I think that as a kid, I always had an interest. Whether I realized even what interior design was or not, I don't think I had any sense back then. But I definitely was always drawn to decorating my space. And even when I was really young, I would get my father to come help me rearrange my bedroom furniture, probably at least once a year, just to reposition everything. And then I would spend hours styling it and hanging art and having everything exactly the way I wanted it. To make it feel like a new space, because as the youngest of 3 kids, I had the smallest room, and I think my parents had a little pity and they kind of gave me a little more creative freedom in that room.
It's funny how, sorry, just
Yeah.
how as a kid you were already resourceful to make the best of your
Yeah.
small space.
Yep. Third child. But, but yeah, no, it definitely, I think it just, I realized early on that by shifting things around, it just changed the whole effect and feel of the room. And I guess I would get bored with whatever setup I had and feel the need to kind of change it. So anyway, that was something that was always there in the background. And I think that carried on through the years, as I moved into dorm rooms when I was in college, into apartments with roommates. Taking care of my space and making it look and feel a certain way was always a priority for me. But I didn't really consider it as a career when I was younger. In high school and college, I was a French studies major, which I think we've talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, back then I was sort of leaning more towards, I was more into writing and language, and I always had an interest in journalism. So that was more the track that I was on. I was thinking that I either wanted to get into film or journalism. I wasn't sure if it was writing or TV or, you know, one of those avenues. But when I graduated from college, I did end up getting a job in television production. So that's sort of where my career began. And I did that for a while, but it was I worked in college sports TV is where I sort of started off, and
Wow.
the schedule was super demanding. You know, I would work days on end, weeks, and not have breaks sometimes. And I ultimately wanted a little bit more work-life balance. So then I eventually switched over to magazines, where I didn't work on the editorial side, but I started off working in marketing on the advertising side, ad sales side of the magazine. So more the business end, which was marketing and events. And it was creative, but ultimately still not the perfect fit. During that time, you know, this was, I guess at this point now, it's probably 15 plus years ago. You know, you'd walk into the building at the magazine in the morning, and there would be shelves full of magazines that were free for employees. So that was one of the perks, you know, when you're 25. And I would go in, and, you know, I always gravitated towards the shelter magazine. So I would say that around that time, during those years in my 20s, I started to think about, you know, is this something that I might like to do? And I didn't know if I wanted to switch over to do, you know, editorial for a shelter magazine, focusing on design, or if I wanted to switch over and actually, you know, be trained to do interior design as a profession and take on clients and have a business, et cetera. And ultimately, you know, after a few years, I took some classes. I ended up making the switch. I applied to school. I did a 2-year program at Parsons, and I left my job at a magazine in the middle of a recession, took out a loan, and just sort of started over. And it was hard because a lot of my friends, you know, I think 29, a lot of my friends were already advancing in their careers, and I was really hitting restart. So it was a difficult decision, but it was one that I've never regretted.
That's incredibly brave. And as much as I don't miss school and don't really want to go back, like it sounds a bit almost like dreamy to be like, okay, I have 2 years to learn something completely new and like give my career another chance or another direction. So
absolutely. I mean, I loved that time. I fully, you know, was immersed in it. I took as many classes as I could. I did the program. It was a 2-year program, but I did it in a little bit less than that. I think I did it in 3 semesters because I loaded up on like 6 classes a semester. I mean, I literally did not sleep, but I was so excited about it and I loved it. And I had no question, like, this is what I wanted to do. So it was worth it. And we made sacrifices. I had barely been married a year, and, you know, for me to go back to school, it changed our dynamic, and my husband was supportive, and we did it. So it was definitely the right move. And as soon as, you know, while I was in school, I interned. I worked for someone who had their own business from home. It was a residential business that she ran on her own. So that was great to see firsthand, you know, how someone runs a small business from home, because I knew that someday if I had kids, I would probably want to do that. And then I also was fortunate to have the experience of working at a huge architecture firm in the city of Robert A. M. Stern Architects. They had a smaller interiors department, and I got to work on high-end residential with really talented people. And that was great to experience because that was just a different scale. And then right upon, you know, finishing school, literally weeks, I finished, I think, in December of 2010, and January of 2011, my husband's job moved us to Hong Kong. And so I left school with a degree and a portfolio, which was great. And then I moved to Hong Kong, and I had to find a job. And it took a couple months, but I actually ended up getting a couple offers at the same time. It happened in 1 week. And I went with a job at an American firm, Hirsch Bedner Associates, and they have a presence, you know, many countries all over. And they had a big presence in Asia, and I was able to work on hospitality projects over there. I was able to travel with work. We would go to China. But ultimately it was great experience to work with teams of people on really big, large scale projects, ranging from hotel lobbies and restaurants to guest rooms. It was working on a really large scale. And I think ultimately that gave me the confidence when I came back to the US a couple years later to go out on my own, because, I'd been working on these really large scale projects, and the idea of taking on someone's living room or bedroom, or first floor of their house or apartment, it didn't seem as daunting.
Wow.
So that's sort of the evolution of how I got here.
That's really inspiring. And I mean, just starting by saying that you grew up on Cape Cod, that sounds so dreamy already. And then did you already like traveling before you moved to Asia, or?
I did, yeah. I was a French major, as I mentioned, and when I was in college, I got to live in Paris for a year, so I was able to travel then, which is it was an amazing experience. And then in between, in my 20s, when I could scrape it together and go on a trip, I would. And then, the time in Asia was really just such a gift, because I don't know how or when I would have ever been able to, the time that it takes to fly over to that side of the world alone, you really need chunks of time. So being there and being able to jump, over to a new country for a weekend. They have a lot of public holidays, so you would get a 3 or 4 day weekend, and you would, go to Thailand, go to Bali. I mean, it was really a good experience. And as a designer, definitely a really great experience, because you're exposed to so many different, styles and ideas, and just, even layouts. I mean, you would pick up on details that definitely file away and think about, down the road. So it informs your eye as a designer, and travel is definitely something that I enjoy and something that I miss a lot right now.
Yeah, I'm sure. But yeah, it's very true that inspiration can just go on the back of your brain and come up like in ways that you don't necessarily notice or expect. And it can, you touched on it earlier, but would you say that where you live now, like combined with your past experiences, inspires your style? And like, yeah, Roy Town seems like a really cute town, and it's near the sea and everything. So
yeah, definitely. I think, yes, there's definitely a coastal aesthetic that is popular out here, and that, fits with what I was exposed to growing up. It's a bit different from Cape Cod even, there's definitely a, slight difference, but I think palette wise, you can tell that I grew up near the ocean. I'm drawn to lighter, more neutral tones, blues, and I think that, that influence is always going to be there. But I think because of where I've traveled, where I've lived, other places, cities, I've definitely got more of an eclectic approach. I like mixing pieces from different time periods, and, modern and more traditional elements. I really do like to mix it up. So I think that, that aesthetic has been informed by just, the range of places that I've lived and the experiences that I've had.
for sure. And is that something that clients notice when they book you? Like, it's something that they come to you for?
I think so. I think, when you're starting out, your portfolio often reflects just the projects that you're taking as you're getting going. But I think over time, I've started to kind of collect more examples of what I'm capable of doing, and, a look that is representative of, some of those experiences.
Yeah, you've been doing this for a few years, but I know that when you start a business creatively, at the beginning, sometimes you feel like the clients don't get your aesthetic very well, and you don't always get to do a style that you love, and you have to adapt to the client. But as you grow, usually like you get to do projects that you absolutely love, and clients come to you for that. Would you say that you've gotten to that point? Or, I mean, obviously we want to adapt to the client each time, but it's a balance.
I think, yes, I think that has started to, it's been I've been doing this on my own now for over 7 years. So it's I'm further along, I would say, in that process. I think in the beginning, you're just happy to have projects and kind of do anything to make them work. And I think also when you're first starting out, not everyone starts out with a very clear aesthetic. I think, it's funny, I just was going through some old folders and looking back at my school portfolio, and I think that there has always been some sort of consistent underlying aesthetic that has come through in my work. I definitely like clean lines, and, you know, I do like to mix pattern, but not in an overwhelming way. And I think that, you know, the material choices I made even back in school and the material choices I would make now are not so widely different. I think that there's just, you know, inherently something, you know, that comes through through the years, even with the projects where I was really working hard to work with a client's aesthetic. But yes, I think, you know, again, like the more you build in your portfolio, I think the more examples you put out there to people of what you're capable of doing. And I think through social media, you have more avenues and ways of kind of sharing your viewpoint with people. You know, whether it's just posting a picture of a palette, a mood board, to kind of inspire someone and give them a sense of what's possible. Yeah.
Absolutely. And because this series of interviews is really about how creativity helps us grow in our businesses, I just want to ask if you think that your creativity, because you run a creative business, but obviously running a business in itself is not necessarily creative, would you say that your creativity informs how you run your business? Or
I think when you work on your own, especially when you're starting out, I mean, you have to be creative in your approach to everything. You know, no one gives you a manual. Even if you've worked for other people, you know, you're working for people who have established businesses. And when you're starting out on your own, I mean, you literally have to figure out every single aspect of the business along the way. And it can be really difficult. And I think you have to be flexible, and you have to be open to, you know, reaching out to others sometimes, asking questions, finding your way, and adapting. And, you know, you have to be open to success and failure. And I think when things don't work out, you learn a lesson from it, and you just, you know, moving forward, you take that information along with you, and it helps inform the decisions that you make next time around. I think we've all experienced that, as, you know, if you own a small business. So it's different creativity, I'd say, from when I'm sitting down to design a room for someone and pull together a color scheme. That is, I'd probably say, more intuitive. And I think on the business side, it's much more strategic. But, you know, in times like this, like 2020, I think creativity is really important. I've known other people who've had to adapt and change their businesses and find other avenues and other revenue streams, really. And you end up doing things that you maybe hadn't thought of before. But, you know, we can talk a little bit more. I've told you that
yeah, go ahead.
You know, I have this year, I sort of had it in the back of my mind. It's sort of, the idea kind of came through to me last year. At the end of last year, I took a trip to LA, and I was looking for accessories and sourcing for clients for upcoming photo shoots for projects. I usually style with accessories at the end of a project and then photograph it. So I took that trip, and, you know, I was inspired by a lot of the things that I found on that trip. And I actually had time by myself to do the sourcing, and I didn't feel rushed. And while I was doing that, I started to think, wow, you know, I also came across things that I wasn't finding in Connecticut necessarily. Maybe if I had to go into the city, I would find similar things, but, you know, there's a slightly, you know, a different aesthetic out in California, and I was really inspired. So I bought a lot of things to bring back, and I was thinking, you know, wouldn't it be great if I had a place to kind of keep more of this, or bring more of this to my clients, or, you know, people who might be interested. So I started to think about maybe doing something with the shed in my backyard, where it could be an office space, but also a place to store some of that, or maybe showcase it in some way. But it was just kind of an idea in the back. And then 2020 came along, and obviously, you know, everything with COVID and us being home, and, you know, I work on the first floor of my house where I am right now. This is my office, which is also my dining room.
Oh.
And my children are running in and out all day long when they're around. It all works perfectly when it's just me at home and everyone's at school and my husband's at work. But, you know, as March came along, that was not the case. So I was finding ways of working around them like waking up early in the morning or working into the evening, whatever it took. And it did take a toll over time because I didn't want to stop working, and I had to stay on top of their schoolwork because we were doing remote learning. So, it was very difficult for a period, but in April, as it started to warm up, one day I brought my daughter with me out to the shed, and I was like, we're just clearing this out. I just want to see if this is even an option. And it was warm enough that I could sit out there. It was not insulated, but I was able to sit out there, and I had a Wi-Fi connection, and I just started to work out there for a few hours when I could sneak it in. And it really made me realize, wow, this is something I can do, And I think my wheels had already been turning, but it just felt like, why wait? Like, I feel like this is an asset right now, and I definitely could benefit if we take this on. So we started really talking about it by May, June, and then I think construction in August. And now I have a shed that is complete, and it's an office space. It can be used that way. And I don't think it's going to be my main office. I think I see it as more of like a little annex where I can pop out and, be quiet. I can keep it neat. It's not overflowing with all of my materials. If I need to bring stuff out there and work, I will. But I want it to be a really nice space that relaxes my mind, and also a space where I can bring clients eventually and do, sessions with them. And maybe I think in 2021, I might integrate some hourly consulting for people who have not been clients. I get a lot of one-off questions from friends and acquaintances, oh, I'm stuck on this room, or, do you have any ideas for this? And I can't take everyone on, and really small projects, I can't take, all of that on all the time when I have big projects going on. But I would like to help people in that way. I think giving it a professional opinion in a focused environment versus when we're out having a drink is a better way to do it. So I think that's something I would like to integrate for the upcoming year. So that is something that came out of this year that I wasn't expecting. And it's been so far a positive.
Yeah, like it's something that comes up and has came up a lot this year, having a dedicated space for work and creativity and all of that. And did I see that you're like showcasing accessories from the shed? Or are you selling them? Like, can people come in?
So I actually just last week had a pop-up sale.
Yeah.
For now, for the time being, I see it as, I'm going to try to kind of spend some time collecting items, have a sale. Right now I actually did pretty well at the sale, so I feel like I need to kind of reassess and maybe restock for the next one, and maybe I'll do that in the spring and kind of see how it goes from there. And then also, if I do end up having private consulting hours with people in the shed, that will be an opportunity for them to also see, what items I have on display. So I'm kind of thinking of it that way, more of pop-up, by appointment, but but it's an extension, and it's also something that I really enjoy. Sometimes when I'm outsourcing for people, I see things that I really love that I know would be amazing, a pair of chairs or whatever it may be that could be reupholstered and brought back to life. And this just gives me an opportunity to kind of tap into that. That is one of the fun parts of my job. So, it could be lucrative, but it can also be, satisfying.
So you did share about how it unfolded for you, but I'd like to know, back in March when we really realized that the year was going to be so different, what were your first reactions and thoughts? Did you put anything in place specifically? Did you have any goals for 2020 that had to be put aside?
I mean, yes, I was not obviously prepared for what came, and it happened so quickly, and having young children, that was kind of the thing that derailed a lot of the plans initially. I had just started a new project, end of February. It was someone who had finished a renovation, and they were desperate to, furnish their room because they had 3 young kids, and that was their main living space. It was an open plan. So, and she was right down the street. So I was very fortunate that I was able to start that project really at the beginning of quarantine, lockdown. But I would say, it was, it, it was just a challenge. And I think in February, I had, so I worked with you at the end of last year to rebrand and kind of relaunch my website. And I had a very kind of, I had a lot of enthusiasm going into 2020. And one of my plans was to change how I do my accounting and sort of streamline parts of my business so that I was working more efficiently and setting myself up for, better results in the future. And I, started to work with a bookkeeper to help with some of the back end accounting so that it was freeing me up to do more work that I enjoy doing. And, in February, I had, out of nowhere, I just had a ton of projects fall on my lap. And I was looking ahead at the year, and I felt like I had, a lineup that was going to take me through really to the fall and be very busy. And then March came, and it was clear that, some of those projects were going to fall away. So I was lucky to hold on to that one project that I had just begun. And then I had a couple other things that I was wrapping up. And I was lucky to work through quarantine and lockdown, but it was, not what I was expecting.
And you're sorry, you also, I assume, like, you usually like need to move around, like meet people, see their spaces, order things online that probably were stuck.
There were so many. I think patience has been the theme for this year for all of us, whatever you're going through. I think, expectations, you just can't have expectations, really. I think it's managing, it's adjusting to that in such a different way. I think, in terms of project management, there have been delays so many production supply chain is an issue. So many items have been on back order, furniture getting custom made, things are delayed, fabrics are back ordered. So that's delaying the making of this. It's, unexpected elements. They're just part of the package right now. And that's something that I have to explain very clearly upfront to clients, especially when I'm starting a new one now. I've had projects, everyone always wants everything done yesterday. And I think that's something that you're always up against in this business. But I think, right now more than ever, you really have to just communicate with people, and we're all kind of experiencing the same thing, and no one really has control. So you have to kind of roll with it and adapt. And we've all had to. But in terms of the business, it's definitely, there have been frustrations and, elements that you could never have predicted, but you just kind of have to work around them, and obstacles, you just have to shift and focus on something else and, work through it.
Yeah. And you've mentioned a few unexpected things that came out of 2020. Do you have anything else, like more, because it's funny how this year I feel like personal, professional life sort of merged together a lot. So
yes, going into this year, I feel like, I wanted to accomplish a few things. Like, I think that shed idea was in the back of my mind. I knew I wanted to clean up like the accounting side of my business and streamline that side so that it wasn't overwhelming me, because sometimes I would get so caught up in the creative, and then I would be like, oh my gosh, I have to deal with all of this financial stuff, and now I feel so behind. So I think, I put practices, systems in place that have, eliminated some of that stress. And in some ways, that slowdown period that occurred in March, April was good timing in terms of giving me time to think through how I really want to approach the rest of the year. But in terms of personal, so going into the year, it was like, I thought about the shed idea. I knew I wanted to do the business, streamlining accounting, and I knew that I wanted to go to Cape Cod for a chunk of time in the summer, because I had a significant birthday this year in August. And that was sort of the gift I wanted to give myself, was to take a little bit of a break, not just a week, but like a few weeks was what I had in mind. And, and truthfully, in February, I had so many projects lined up. I was like, oh my gosh, this is never going to happen. But then things fell away and recalibrated. And, I was able to steadily work through June. And then, I started a new project, but I made it clear that I was taking July to be with my family, because, during that time that we were all in the house together, my kids were just watching me work all the time, me and my husband. So I felt that I owed that to them. And I felt like it was necessary, after the juggling of that craziness, waking up at 5 a.m. to work before everyone was up, and then do school,
Wow.
and then jump back and forth to work. I mean, it was very hectic. So I really felt that a reset was important. And I did that in July, and I was very fortunate to be able to do that, because it definitely gave me more clarity on how I wanted to approach certain aspects of the business moving forward.
Yeah.
And then it also allowed for more time. I think one of the other things that has come out of this is, integrating. I've always been someone that likes to take walks, but exercise, as soon as I get overwhelmed with work and busy, that's like the first thing to go. But somehow some of it is having the coverage of another adult home all the time, but it's allowed me to integrate it more regularly into the schedule. And having that balance is so important. Having that mental break every day, it just makes a really big difference, and it influences, how you work the rest of the day. And then I've also tried to weave in a little meditation, but it's a work in progress.
Wow.
It's hard. Good for you. It's hard for me to stop and slow down like that. But, I think that's it. I think, I'm very wired to just keep going. It's hard to take breaks, and I'm happy that I was able to take, a break in the middle of this year and kind of reset.
Yeah, that's great. It seems like you did grow and learn a lot. And do you have any specific things that you hope you can bring into 2021? Or
I know, I think 2021, I'm goal oriented, so I always have kind of a list of things that I want to accomplish. I mean, I think, I think that I have a couple, I would like to do some bigger projects in 2021. I think if the schedule allows for it, and, if everyone stays on a regular schedule in school, et cetera. But I think, you spend so much time on these interior projects, and then you photograph them at the end. And I've posted them to website and social media, but I would ultimately love to have something published. But I think that, that's a job in and of itself. You have to really focus on doing that. And so I do want to set some time aside to make that a priority this year, because I think, I have some ideas, and I think that is something I would like to do.
Yes, I agree. I think when you reached out to us to rebrand, it was obvious that you're starting to sort of like consider your own business almost as a client, or at least as important as a client.
Absolutely.
And it's a daily exercise to keep feeding your business what it needs to grow, and keep focusing on sharing things and everything. And I mean, I know that for interior designers it's a lot harder than for example, for me, we can create things and share them online, and for you guys I'm sure it's harder because it's a much larger scale. But I always love seeing your snippets and behind the scenes of what you share. And are you able sometimes to share things from an ongoing project before you share the whole thing? And
I am. And I think that's a good point. I think for 2021, that is, sharing is something that I hope to do more of. It's hard. I mean, it's you just managing the creative side and the business side of a business. You're just, there's always something that needs to get done. So you really have to prioritize other things like social media and continually, posting and sharing your work along the way. It's not something that just happens. You have to make time for it. You have to plan for it. And you have to be committed to doing it. And I think, for me, for years, it was sort of on the back burner, and I know, and I fully recognize it. But I think, where I'm at now with my career and, the work that I'm doing, I do feel like I need to kind of work on that side and put it out there a little bit more. So I plan to.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier said than done, obviously. But I think that's so inspiring. I really loved hearing about everything you learned this year. And so thank you for sharing so much. I really hope this this interview reaches a lot of freelance founders or small business founders, because I'm sure there's a ton of wisdom to be learned from this. So thank you so much for sharing. Where can we find you so we can really follow your journey?
Well, you can always find me on Instagram at Colleen Siddig Design. And my website is colleensiddig.com. And that's the best way to find me.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing. I hope you will have an amazing rest of the year.
Thank you.